Hello fellow YouTube friends, followers, fools and flabbergasters, my name is Mason and it's time for another Guild Wars 2 easy and flexible build guide. The goal of this guide is to enable you as much flexibility and low switching costs between PvE game modes on a particular class and elite specialization. This means that whenever possible I will use only one set of gear with slight alterations. To accomplish that goal, I suggest gear that allows for high damage and the necessary defense or support is accommodated for through traits, food and skill changes only. Today's class of choice is the Mesmer and the elite specialization is the Mirage. In this video I'm going to show you how to do good damage, how to provide alacrity and how to survive on your own in open world. The build links are as always in the description of the video. But before we dive in, let's talk some pros and cons. The build Mirage is one of the most insane open world roaming builds in the game because it is highly survivable in glass cannon gear. It further has great support capabilities as it provides permanent 25 might and alacrity when using staff. And as if that wasn't enough, it does great damage even with a simplified rotation. Finally, it also brings the Mesmer kit with portals and all that stuff. It does have a few downsides though. The clone monitoring can be annoying if targets tend to die a lot, and this build relies on external boons for the fully maximized damage. But now let's dive into the build. Alright friends, today I got something really special for you. In this video I'll do an extended update on Condition Mirage, my very first elite specialization that I've unlocked. And to this day, a specialization that evokes vivid memories of my first steps in post-level 80 content. That said, I want to note that Mirage is not the most straightforward specialization to choose. I had no idea back then, but once you have the basics down, it becomes an absolute powerhouse in both solo and group gameplay. As always, I'll give a brief outline on what characterizes Mirage and the playstyle associated with it. Since Mirage is a specialization with a high skill ceiling, I'll mostly cover the basics and simplified gameplay and rotations that reward you with high damage and satisfying gameplay without becoming overly complex. First and foremost, Mirage is known for its change to the dodge mechanic. Instead of the regular directional dodge, you will become blurry and gain a little boost to movement speed instead. This is called Mirage Cloak. Now you might think, why is that important? Mirage Cloak grants you access to ambush attacks for a brief time during it. These attacks replace your auto attacks and are vastly more powerful than your regular auto attacks. That is why on Mirage you'll want to dodge as often as possible to gain access to the ambushes. A few other abilities further create Mirage mirrors for you. These also give you Mirage Cloak when you touch them, leading to increased damage once more. Ambushes are not only good for damage though. On staff they also provide alacrity around you, which is awesome, but more on that later. Like core Mesmer, Mirage can make use of shatter skills and create clones of yourself, which attack the enemy that you attack when they spawn. They do much lower damage than you do, but they become an integral part of your gameplay in several ways. First, on an Alacrity or DPS Mirage, having all 3 clones up is very important, because with the traits that we're choosing, your clones also gain access to Mirage Cloak when you do. So the clones will perform ambush attacks whenever you do, albeit a bit slower. For open world gameplay, clones are the best decoy you have. Mirage itself is fairly squishy when you get hit, but with all the dodges and clones for distraction, you can avoid pretty much all incoming attacks while dealing great amounts of damage on your own. Your clones will unsummon when the target you summoned them on dies or goes out of range. This is what makes Mirage harder to handle against weaker enemies with lower health bars because you will constantly have to resummon your clones. We will find ways to make that easier later on. For highest damage output, Mirage relies on 2 additional boons compared to other specializations, Regeneration and Vigor. There are easy ways to keep them up on yourself, but they come at the cost of a little bit of damage. If you think they are always covered by support builds and group content, you would be mistaken. Finally, you should not think of Mirage in terms of what it does on the training column, but what it does on actual encounters. That is true for most builds, but very much so for Mirage. The reason for that is its reliance on the Confusion condition. Confusion deals a lower amount of damage over time to enemies compared to Torment or Burning, but also deals damage to them whenever they begin casting a skill. That is a double-edged sword. On some bosses it really shines because they constantly use skills like Karen, Soulless Horror, Lagos, but on others it is much worse because Confusion does not trigger much. On most bosses it works pretty well though. I think you should now have a basic idea of what Mirage is about, so let's start with the weapon choices and skills. The 2 native weapon sets we'll use in general gameplay are Axe and Pistol paired with a staff. This gives you several benefits. You can either go for Axe and Pistol for higher damage and melee gameplay or use the staff for more flexible positioning and range. Also, when using staff, you will always provide a little bit of alacrity around you to varying degrees, which is always great to have. For the alacrity build, we'll run double staff. Not that there is a way to provide 100% alacrity with a Staxe build too, but it changes quite a few things in the build, so I'll put a link to the benchmark of it in the description. Let's go through the skills one by one, starting with the shatter skills. The first one is Mind Drag. This is a strike damage skill. On Conde Mirage, this can mainly be used after Cry of Frustration as an additional small source of free damage. You can do this because the shatter effect does not only appear around your clones, but also around you. Next up we have Cry of Frustration. This is a condition-based shatter that applies a lot of confusion and grants you a good amount of uptime on the Vigor boon. Vigor grants higher endurance recovery, meaning more dodges. It also increases your condition damage on Mirage. This is the main shatter used for damage purposes. Shatter 3 is Diversion. This is a hard CC shatter that applies 1 daze per clone, which can result in noticeable CC damage potential. If you can, you should always prioritize other CC options though, because this requires you to regain 3 clones quickly. Finally we have Distortion. The last shatter skill is an absolute beast. This makes you immune to damage aside from mechanics that forcibly kill you. The duration increases per clone, but even without any, this is a great emergency button. Since the effects of shatters increase in potency per clone, generating more clones will make them more powerful and allow you to use them more frequently. Since access to clones often comes at the cost of damage from other sources, we'll mostly focus on Shatter 2 in most scenarios. In open world, you're free to go ham on all of them though. With our trade loadout, all shatters will also grant Vigor, Stability and an additional boon that varies per shatter. Most important are Vigor on Shatter 2 and Regeneration on Shatter 4. Let's dive into the weapon skills. The main weapon set used for damage is Axe and Pistol. The Axe auto attack chain is pretty simple. It applies bleeding and torment on all hits, with the duration increasing from the first to the last hit. That is why it is generally important to try and finish auto attack chains. This is reinforced by the additional hit you gain from the trait Mirrored Axes. This trait makes your axe skills, including the final hit of the auto attack chain, spawn additional axes that apply torment. The Axe Ambush attack is Imaginary Axes. This makes you and your clones apply more torment than any hit of the auto chain, making this more powerful. You therefore want to use dodges to gain access to this as much as possible. Axe 2 is Lingering Thoughts. This applies just as much torment as the Axe Ambush. It makes you charge forward in a line through your target, is a well finisher and spawns a clone after it's cast. The clone, however, is only summoned if an enemy is nearby. We mainly use this for the clone and the well finisher, but more on that later. Axe skill 3 is Axis of Symmetry. This teleports you and your clones to a random location around your target and applies confusion. This is also an evade skill and a leap finisher, so you can use this to dodge attacks and use combo fields. The neat benefit of this is that it also makes your clones change target with you. You can use this to prevent your clones from dying or simply have them attack the same target as you do. Keep in mind that Axe 2 and 3 are forced movement skills, so don't use them when you are unsure about being in melee. I yeeted myself into stupid deaths, more than I want to admit. After that, Pistol 4 is a Phantasm skill. On top of the bullets you fire yourself, this creates an image of yourself that does the same and turns into a clone a few seconds later. With the trait Duelist's Discipline, all pistol skills will apply bleeding on hit, giving this pretty nice damage as well. All the projectiles from this have a chance to become projectile finishers, which will be important later. Pistol skill number 5 is Magic Bullet. This applies bleeding and confusion and is a very strong CC skill that stuns the first target, dazes the second and cripples the third. This is also a guaranteed projectile finisher. Moving on to Staff. The Staff auto attack is a slow moving orb that applies torment and confusion to enemies and might and fury to allies. It bounces 2 times to the target that is closest to the last one. Allies and enemies are possible. Gaining Mirage Cloak changes this into Chaos Vortex, which does not only deal more damage through more conditions, but also applies a large amount of might and alacrity to 5 allies. Your clones will also cast Chaos Vortex and apply alacrity around you, not around them. This allows you to easily maintain alacrity with 3 clones up, but more on that later. Note that these conditions and boons are applied when the cast finishes and the purple projectile is launched, not at the start. You need to let this animation finish, also for your clones, to make it work. This is important because your clones do not have quickness, so they cast it a bit slower than you do. The second staff skill is Phase Retreat. At first glance this might look a bit lackluster, but it summons a clone every time you use it. You can also use this to retreat from dangerous mechanics since it teleports you backwards without a cast time, so you can use it at any time in the rotation. Skill number 3 is the Staff Phantasm. Phantasmal Warlock. This skill is not really a DPS gain in group content where vulnerability is capped, but in solo this can be worth casting if you need clones. We'll also make use of this in the Staff Alacrity build. Skill number 4 is Chaos Armor. This skill is pretty powerful because it grants you Chaos Aura, applying useful boons to you and conditions to enemies around you when you get hit. This is an instant cast, so you can use it while doing other things without interrupting them. It will also apply confusion around you when you cast it. Skill number 5 is Chaos Storm. This is not really a large DPS gain for yourself, but it applies a hard CC and is a strong combo field. On the Staxe build, we'll make use of this combo field to apply lots of additional confusion, so remember that for later. Moving on to utilities. In the healing slot I always go with Force Oasis. This gives you better vigor uptime and heals you over time. Most importantly, this spawns a Mirage mirror in its location after 3 seconds, allowing you to gain another dodge and thus more damage and Alacrity application. The next 2 skills are signets that are just there for the stat boost they provide. You don't really want to use them because you lose either Condi damage or expertise if you do. You can use the signet of domination for CC if you really need it. You should prioritize pistol or star 5 instead though. In the final utility slot, the default skill is Crystal Sands. It applies lots of confusion and further creates another Mirage mirror at its destination, allowing you to dodge another time. It also applies quite a bit of confusion. Finally, we have Jaunt as the elite skill. Jaunt is one of the coolest elites in the game in my opinion due to the low cooldown and teleport included. On top of that, it does strike damage and applies confusion. This is not a stun break, but it can be used when stunned to move out of bad stuff. So it is another emergency button that you have available to you. It further removes a condition from you and is a leap finisher for combo fields. Let's get to gear and consumables. For the 2 build variants we'll need 2 staves and 1 axe and pistol. On Conde Mirage we'll be using Viper all the way. There's really no need to change to anything else. Additional survivability can be reached through traits and food, but more on that later in a dedicated section. Since Mirage focuses on several conditions, Torment, Bleeding, Confusion, it is best to use general Condi duration runes. In order to reach the most overall Condi duration, we'll go for Nightmare runes. Note that you will not cap out Condi duration without either expertise infusions or a particular food and utility combination. On the 2 staves, we'll be putting Bursting and Energy Sigils. The Energy Sigils grant you half your endurance back when you weapon swap, leading to more dodges and thus ambushes. On Axe and Pistol, I put Bursting and Torment Sigils. This is done to make the dodge timings on the Axe and Pistol section a bit easier to manage. You can also go for another Energy Sigil instead of Torment here. You just have to fit in another dodge into the rotation. The consumables for damage are the expertise and Condi duration. We use this food because unless enough expertise infusions are available to you, this trades in 30 Condi damage for expertise 1-1, which is a bit better. It's not a big deal if you use standard condition damage and expertise food though, especially when it's ascended. The standard utility item is the Tuning Icicle. This gives you more or less identical stats to the Toxic Focusing Crystal at a much cheaper price as long as you have enough expertise. And Conde Mirage does have enough expertise, so we use this. If you can afford it and or want to simulate having infusions, you can also use a Writ of Masterful Malice. Alright, let's hop over to specialization and traits. I'm not going to go through all traits here because many of them are self-explanatory. I place emphasis on the traits that are key to the functionality of the build and or differ across the variants. The specializations are always the same: Dueling, Chaos and of course Mirage. Chaos is the main specialization for Staff Mirage because it empowers the entire playstyle but is reliant on high regeneration uptime. Without regeneration, you lose condition damage done, reduced condition damage taken, condition duration, and concentration, which are desirable attributes in all build variants. A trait I talked about before is Bountiful Disillusionment. This makes your shatters grant additional boons to you, allowing you to flexibly grant yourself those boons when you need them. Distortion, Shatter 4, grants you regeneration, and Cry of Frustration, Shatter 2, grants vigor, so keep that in mind if you need additional uptime on these boons. In case you do, you can use Shatter 4 after Shatter 2 since the boons do not scale with the number of clones shattered. Dueling, the next specialization, provides a lot of damage too. It offers a large amount of bleeding damage from clones and phantasms, higher fury and vigor uptime for more crit chance and condition damage. The trait Sharper Image is also why you want to maximize the number of clones available because it leads to more bleeding damage. Blinding Dissipation and Inaptitude, the traits of choice in both the DPS and Alacrity variant, apply additional confusion whenever you apply blind to an enemy. It also makes interrupts apply blind and thus confusion as well. This is another DPS gain since you gain additional stacks of confusion. Finally, we have Mirage. In order to keep regeneration up on yourself, you need to use Renewing Oasis. This grants regeneration whenever you gain Mirage Cloaks or on dodging or shattering a mirror. This is the safe bet for pug raids and strikes since you can never be certain that others will provide regeneration for you. If you know that you will have external source of 100% regeneration uptime, you can use Riddle of Sand. This applies additional confusion on the first ambush after every shatter skill you use. This is not a large DPS gain, but it is noticeable in actual content. Since I only do pugs, I usually go with Renewing Oasis. After that, the master trait depends on the build. On double staff, Mirrored Axis does not do anything for you, so you can use Mirage Mantle for easy protection uptime or Desert Distortion for additional Mirage Mirrors when using Shatter 4. I usually go with Mirage Mantle since Desert Distortion is not really noticeable. On the Grandmaster trait, you should always run Infinite Horizon. This trait does not seem too powerful, but the reason why it is worth it is that it makes your clones use ambush skills whenever you do. This is a large damage increase and also required to provide alacrity, so you should keep this whenever possible. While Mirage is very resilient on its own through its dodges, it can make sense to build for a more forgiving playstyle so that you can sustain on your own. On Mirage, this consists of providing essential boons for yourself and maximizing the number of dodges you have available. You will still be providing might and alacrity around you, which is pretty neat. As usual, we'll follow a particular priority list for survivability changes. Gear is expensive unless you have legendary gear, so we'll adjust food and trades first. In terms of food, the best bet for you is the bowl of Orient truffle and meat stew. This increases your endurance recovery by 40%, adding up to a total of 90% paired with the Vigor Boom. It also grants might on every dodge, which is a neat side effect. You will lose some condition damage and expertise from this, but the trade-off is low due to the large number of ambushes you can do. If you want some of your expertise back, you can run the Furious Tuning Crystal, which trades expertise for condi damage roughly 1-to-1. In terms of traits, you can make quite a few changes to become more survivable. In the open world variant, I drop an aptitude for deceptive evasion. This makes every dodge you do create another clone. Since the blind from this trait will no longer cause confusion, you can also swap to evasive mirror. This will make you reflect projectiles for 2 seconds every time you evade an attack. This is really strong against ranged enemies, which are basically the only danger you encounter since you cannot kite them. On top of that, you can swap to Illusionary Defense in Chaos and Mirage Mantle in Mirage. These two will further boost your defense noticeably. They will also both trigger on dodges, one due to the synergy with Deceptive Evasion and one whenever Mirage Cloak ends. So remember, it all stands and falls with dodging as much as possible. Only if these changes are not enough for you, you should make gear changes by swapping a few larger pieces to Trailblazer. This will increase your toughness and vitality without costing condition damage. Especially on Staff Mirage, it should not be needed though. Talking of Staff Mirage, that brings me to how to provide alacrity. Like on the open world variant, providing alacrity in a simple way requires you to use 2 staves on Mirage. In order to maintain alacrity that way, all you need to do is to frequently use dodges and let the ambush attack finish on both yourself and your clones. This means that you should squeeze 1 or 2 auto attacks between your dodges. To generate clones, you can simply use Staff 2 and 3. If you want to include Shatter 2 for higher confusion, you can use Staff 3 when Shatter 2 has around 3 seconds of cooldown left. Then use Shatter 2 and 1, and then use Shatter 2 to generate 1 clone. The 2 phantasms from Staff 3 will then transform into clones right after, putting you back to 3. Both staves have energy sigils on them, which is why it's important to swap weapons on cooldown to make use of the additional endurance. This will further increase might and alacrity coverage and also increase confusion stacks and damage. That's it, you don't need to change gear or anything to maintain alacrity. Double Staff Mirage is especially good due to its versatility and inherent resilience, plus a nice freedom of positioning due to the large radius of alacrity application. And it deals very nice damage for an alacrity build. The concept of the staff rotation is also part of the DPS build, which brings me to rotation guidance. First off, I chose the Staxe rotation here because it is easier for beginners to grasp because it has staff in it. The rotation consists of 2 main parts, a section on axe and pistol and a staff section. That is why it's labeled as Staxe. The most important part of the rotation is the Shatter combo, which is conveniently also the opener. Due to this combo, you can basically see this build as similar to Hybrid Soul Beast, for example, where your damage spikes up during a particular skill combo. Since this combo involves forced movement, random positioning and melee gameplay, it is important to think about your positioning when you use it. I have never yeeted myself into dangerous stuff with this, I promise, not even once. The Shatter combo involves you starting on Staff. Here you use Staff 5 and then weapon swap. Staff 5 puts down an ethereal combo field. This combo field is important because it will make your axe and pistol skills apply lots of confusion stacks. After the weapon swap, use Pistol 4. This includes projectile finishers applying confusion. You then have around 3 seconds until the phantasm from Pistol 4 is transformed into a clone. In this window, use Axe 3. This is a leap finisher that applies Chaos Aura to you, in turn applying confusion to enemies that hit you. Then use Shatter 2 and 1 paired with Axe 2. Axe 2 will create a clone after it's done, so it's important to shatter before that happens. Axe 2 is a whirl finisher which applies even more confusion. Et voila, you'll be at 3 clones after this and you'll spike up to 50 confusion stacks during this combo. The first thing you can do when learning the rotation is to practice this combo. Just reset your skills with a special action key and repeat it. After that, the regular rotation flow starts. The rotation anchors on 2 points, Shatter 2 and False Oasis, your healing skill. They both have a 20-second cooldown with Alacrity, so you can weapon swap on cooldown, it loops pretty perfectly. After the Shatter combo on Axe and Pistol, I always use Crystal Sands. There is a slight delay before the Mirage Mirror appears, giving your third clone the time to be ready. For the remaining time on Axe and Pistol, you'll want to use Axe 3 once more, paired with auto attacks and fit in additional dodges. Then as soon as you can, swap to Staff and use False Oasis and Chaos Armor. From now on, you want to swap to Staff whenever False Oasis becomes available. Immediately after False Oasis, dodge. False Oasis gives you another dodge 3 seconds after it is casted, so you can't just wait for that to happen. Let the ambush of it finish and do 1 or 2 additional auto attacks. Then do another ambush, another 1 or 2 auto attacks and another ambush. You should try to get in 4 ambushes on Staff every time. Then when weapon swap is about to be ready, use Staff 5 to put down the combo field and swap to Axe and Pistol. Here you start with the Shatter combo again. After that you use Axe 3 another time and dodges until False Oasis is ready and go back to Staff. Then you repeat this pattern until whatever you are attacking is dead. However, in case you find yourself in a situation where using the Shatter combo is not safe, simply stay on Pistol and Axe and delay the combo and use it as soon as it is available. Then do the rest of the rotation as usual. For CC you have Staff 5 and Pistol 5 available. Shatter 3 also CCs, but for that you need to get 3 clones back quickly. This rotation might take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you do, it's a very solid rotation for all kinds of content. It feels great to use, it loops perfectly and allows you to adjust it to content in a pretty simple way. Okay, the deed is done for now. I hope this video was insightful for you and made you want to try Condition Mirage. Feel free to like and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm, and happy blinking.